Excellent. So today, as Alan kind of nicely teed us up for, is the final session of our kind of Think Like an Athlete psychoeducation workshops. So really what I'm going to do tonight is try and kind of give you one or two slides just to summarize all of the different workshops and just remind you before we go into the kind of the winter meet next weekend of all the different things that we've covered so far. We'll have a wee bit of room for discussion at the end, and then as I mentioned, I'm going to kindly ask if you could spare me just a couple of minutes to fill in some feedback just for us going forward to see what you liked, what you would like more of, what you didn't like. Jack is not with us yet, but I believe he is going to be joining us for the second half of the session as soon as he gets back. So I have tactically placed the review slides for all of my workshops first, and then Jack's slides are second, so that when he comes in, if he'd like to add anything to my kind of summary, he can do that. So hopefully that gives you kind of a wee bit of a summary. And I suppose I'll maybe just apologise quickly that it is a bit of a whistle-stop tour of what we've covered. So if there is any sessions that you missed, you might have some questions, that's fine. Just put them in the chat box, unmute yourself. I'd love to hear them. But equally, and again, I've linked this at the end, all the recorded sessions are on the Scottish Swimming YouTube page, so you can go back and watch the sessions that you've missed. So as I said, that's in a link at the end for you. So yeah, and I thought we've started and finished with this every week. So just to do it one last time, obviously we've been through all these sessions so far, and we're right here at the end, and I think like an athlete final roundup and moving forward. So we've had the key skills for optimal results, key skills for when the going gets tough. We spoke about nerves and anxiety, further developing your skills, your mindset and visualization, building up to a major meet, and then we had race day behaviours and routines last week from Jack. And again, just to kind of bring these to your attention again, the excellence and performance behaviours are the psychological characteristics of developing excellence. We've spoken quite a lot about imagery and what makes effective imagery. We've spoken about attentional control and how we can focus our attention. We've spoken a little bit about realistic performance evaluation in terms of goal setting. Role clarity and commitment, that's one that we've not touched on quite as much. I think that'll be more kind of individual specific, but we've done loads on planning and organisation, loads of ideas for you, a little bit about perceptions of pressure. Again, goal setting and self-reinforcement we've spoken about, and quality practice, what that looks like. So again, if that's something that does interest you, there's loads of research around these, you can go away and have a look at that. But to get into the nitty gritty, and it feels like a long time ago, we started off talking about goal setting. We spoke about the importance of goal setting and the different types of goals that we might have. So this is kind of my favourite slide from all the goal setting stuff we've done. This idea that we have process, performance, and outcome goals. The outcome goal is the kind of the end result that we really want. We might want that first place medal. Our performance goals are more about what we're going to have to do to achieve that outcome goal, irrespective of what others do. So what time do you want to swim? And then our process goals, we're going to have loads of process goals that break down all the smaller tasks that we need to do on a kind of a daily basis or weekly basis to try and achieve that performance goal. And you might remember way back when, it was right after the US Open finals, and we had that lovely clip of Emma Raducanu talking about the importance of just following her process, even in those moments where things get tricky and unexpected challenges occur. So if we can commit to the process, we can just let that lovely outcome emerge. And it's these process goals that we really want to be focusing on. Similarly, in terms of goal setting, we spoke about having our SMART goals, making sure that they're specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And that's a really important part of it. And how we kind of can evaluate and keep ourselves accountable and keep coming back to these goals. We then spoke about challenges that might get in our way from achieving our goals and different problems that we might encounter and how we might use different coping strategies to overcome these challenges. So we split our coping strategies into problem-focused coping strategies and emotion-focused coping strategies. Typically, people are either more problem-focused or emotion-focused, but a mix of these two different kinds of strategies can be really helpful. So Jack did a lovely session and he spoke about how he would use list writing, his organisation of time and asking for more feedback from his coaches when he was struggling kind of in the build up to major meets. He showed us his lovely Excel spreadsheets of all how he timetabled out his university time, his coaching time, his swim time, his recovery, everything. The use of bullet journaling, we spoke about that as one example as well of how to prioritise our lives and keep on track of things. And again, asking for feedback is something we spoke about. You can just make that meeting with your coach if you're not sure where you're going to ask them those important questions. Then we spoke a bit more about emotion-focused coping, and that included things like using a diary, a reflective diary, or journaling, which we call cathartic writing, which is just about getting all your thoughts and feelings on a page and getting them out of your head and onto the paper. It can be really useful for us because it stops these thoughts whizzing around in our head. We spoke about different relaxation techniques. And again, we'll talk a wee bit about PMR a little bit later on. And then we spoke about grounding and mindfulness techniques. So I spoke about mindfulness in terms of headspace and focusing on our breathing. The grounding techniques, I'm not sure if anyone can remember them, but we spoke about your 5 senses. Notice 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can taste, and 1 thing that you can smell, as something that we can use if we're feeling overwhelmed and need to kind of bring ourselves back to the present moment. Equally, in terms of grounding, we spoke about counting backwards in 3s from 100. You might choose to incorporate a kind of a grounding statement that's just something that just says, my name is Zoe Black and I am strong, or I am a good swimmer. And then the last emotion-focused strategy we spoke about was changing our perspective. So sometimes we call that cognitive reappraisal. That's kind of the fancy word for it, but it is about kind of taking a moment to step back. Okay, can I look at this problem differently? Can I see the situation in a different way? Can I see it as a challenge rather than something that's difficult? Can I see it as an opportunity to do something really exciting? And following on from that, after speaking about coping and when things are tough, we spent a whole session talking about the importance of nerves and anxiety. And the key points really from that session were that nerves are normal. Everybody is nervous, everybody gets nervous, everybody experiences what is anxiety. We had that lovely slide that had the Adam Peaty in the newspaper saying that even he feels anxiety sometimes, but it's about how we manage our anxiety that's really important. And similarly, anxiety will look and feel differently for each of us. So it's really important that we take time to just notice, okay, when I'm anxious, what does that look like? How do I feel? Do I feel it? Is my heart racing? Do I get sweaty? Do I talk really, really fast, like I'm doing a little bit right now? Or do I feel sick? Do I want to run away and hide? Do I get quite angry when I'm anxious? And if we can understand what our anxious behaviours look like, we can manage them better and make sure that they don't affect our performance. We spoke about all the different ways that we could try and reduce anxiety and stop it from affecting our performance. And you might remember I had the lovely diagram that I called a hot cross bun, which talks about how our thoughts affect our feelings, how these affect our behaviour, and then how that also is interlinked with our physiology, what goes on in our body. And we agreed that it was quite difficult, or it can be quite difficult, to just change our feelings and decide that we're not anxious anymore. It doesn't really work like that. And for some people, it can also be quite difficult to change their thoughts. But if we were going to try and change our thoughts, that's where our cognitive reappraisal and our reframing of our thoughts might come in. So we might try and see, okay, this is an opportunity for me to show everyone how super I am, or to do a PB, rather than it seeing it as something that would be make us nervous. But the easiest way that I think we decided to change and reduce our anxiety was by changing our behaviour. So instead of displaying what might be anxious behaviour, which might be kind of making yourself small, cuddling yourself, giving yourself a hug and protecting yourself, we wanted to make ourselves nice and big, stand nice and tall, head back, head up, shoulders back, that big smile on our face. You might remember I spoke about the story about the victory V, and how that makes us all feel more powerful, and we can do these power stances that give us confidence because our brain doesn't understand that we're feeling a wee bit anxious. So if we can take those kind of key points of standing tall, smiling, if we can fake it till we make it, our brain, as soon as we smile, thinks we're happy, and then we can feel a bit more confident, and that anxiety doesn't affect our performance quite as much. And then lastly, in that session, it was also Mental Health Awareness Week. That feels like such a long time ago. We spoke just a little bit about mental health and about it being a spectrum. So it was a spectrum or a continuum. And it's something that we can always be working to improve. We can always try and improve our mental health. We don't either, it's not bad or good. We're somewhere along this line, and it's something we can always be working towards. And kind of to finish off this little section, I just wanted to remind you of this STOP acronym. And I think this is really helpful. It's one of the things I use quite often with clients, just reminding them to stop, whether you're feeling anxious or overwhelmed, or angry or sad. If we can just stop and take a moment, take a deep breath, notice how you're breathing. Are you breathing, are you holding your breath in a rage? Are you breathing really quickly, really fast? Just notice it. Take one deep, slow breath. Observe what thoughts are going through your head. What are you thinking about? And what is your body doing? Are you tense? Are your fists all curled up? Are you ready to fight someone? Are you hiding? Are you anxious? And just notice what's going on. And then P, try and put it into perspective. Okay, what's the bigger picture here? Yes, you're maybe going to do a swim, and yes, you're maybe nervous or anxious about it, but it is one swim and we just need you to give it your best. Ask yourself, is there another way I can look at this? And what would a friend say to me right now? What advice would they give me? Or what advice would I give to a friend in this situation right now? So P, put it into perspective. And then our second P in stop is to proceed. So go forward. What is the next right thing to do here? What fits my values? What kind of person do I want to be? So that STOP acronym, I just think, is something that we can come back to. It's super helpful, whether we're feeling anxious, angry, overwhelmed, whatever it might be. Just stopping, taking a deep breath, observe what thoughts are going through your mind and what's happening in your body, put it into perspective, what's the big picture, and then proceed and move forward and do the next right thing. Taking this to a slightly different kind of topic now, the next few sessions we had looked at planning and organisation. And this was about the foundations of the performance mentality. And Jack gave us a really useful kind of insight into the lessons he'd learned in his time as a swimmer. And these were kind of some of the key points that came out of that first session. So the first was about developing an approach that works for you. And this was one of the key points throughout all these workshops, is that we are all different. Some things will work for some of us and some simply won't. So it's about trying out and not being scared of trying something and it not working. If we don't try, we'll never know. So we need to just keep trying out these different things, figure out what works for us and stick with it. Yep, experiment and learn from each approach. So Jack showed us the example of his kind of handwritten to-do list, and he would write his numbers beside them. And he showed us the example of the really nice tidy bullet journaling, and that other approach that obviously took a bit more care, and that was just more suited to some people than others. He also used the Excel spreadsheets. It was a bit, as he says, it was a bit more clinical. It was a bit more number-based. He had the tables for how many meters, how many sessions he was doing, how many hours of a week he spent in the pool, how many hours he spent eating, how many hours he spent sleeping. He had that lovely pie chart for us. That's something else we can go away and have a little look at, play around, do the maths, get someone else to help you if need be. I know I would be asking for some help. I'd be asking Jack. To see, okay, well, where am I spending most of my time? How can I make better use of my time? What can I do to get the best out of my 24 hours in a day? And then Jack spoke about diaries again. So we've got loads of different kinds of diaries that we can have. You might have a training diary. So Jack shared with us again his training logbook from a way back, I think it was in 2011. And he would kind of write down the sets he'd done each day. He was scoring them out of 10, and he was leaving a little bit of a comment, a bit of feedback about what had happened in that session and why he'd given it that score. It might be that you just keep a diary to keep organised. I swear religiously by having a kind of a yearly diary for me to keep everything in, otherwise I don't know where I'm supposed to be. Or it might be that you want to have a reflective diary. That's something else I find a lot of value in. Again, when your brain's really busy, there's lots of thoughts going on, it can be quite hard to focus on what's in front of you. If we can just open up either a bit of paper and a pen, or whether it's in the notes on your phone or on your laptop, and just type right away, get those thoughts out of our head and onto paper, then we've got more brain space, more energy, more time to kind of focus on what's important to us and swimming and performance, or school, whatever kind of performance it might be. So by using that kind of reflective, cathartic writing, we're freeing up that energy in our brain to do what's important, and we're not getting bogged down in all those different thoughts. Jack also spoke about the use of his logbooks for diet and nutrition as being something that's super helpful for him to go back and kind of identify what was going well, what wasn't going so well, and notice any patterns. He had key dates in his long-term planners, again, to kind of just keep pointing him towards and remind him of what he was working towards. And then he spoke a bit about cognitive motivation, routine, and accountability. So not only were these logbooks and diaries helpful for him to stay organised, they also helped him to stay accountable and reminded him that this was what's important to him. On days where he didn't really feel like it, he would have to write that down and look back at that, and it would encourage him the next time to go back, put a little bit more effort in, and really strive and try for it. And in line with that, and kind of forming our routines, our next session with Jack focused on sleep. He spent quite a lot of time explaining to us how important sleep is, and how important it is to have routine and consistency, and not just how many hours we sleep, but the quality of our sleep. So sleep is one of the most underrated performance enhancers, is kind of the new phrase that we keep hearing in psychology, that sleep is so important. He also mentioned that there were skills that we can practice that can help us with our sleep. Progressive muscle relaxation is one of them. And again, I'll come on to that a wee bit more in a second. But also that being less stressed and more organized can improve our sleep. So again, going back to our diaries, if we're using a diary, if we're using reflective writing, we're getting those thoughts out of our head, we're freeing ourselves from them. And that's going to help us get to sleep a lot quicker and have a much better sleep. He also described to us multiple benefits of improved sleep, both on our cognitive functioning, so on our brain and on our thinking, but also on our physiological system, so on our body repairing itself, building muscles, recovering properly, and how we can use that to our advantage. And then he described some of his key learnings, about sleep in relation to competitions, and also about nutrition. So how can we improve our sleep? Because again, this is the key points we want, isn't it? What can I do to make my sleep better? Reducing our social media use and overly stimulating activities pre-bed. I can't remember exactly how long Jack said, but my typical rule of thumb would be 45 minutes before bedtime or before sleeping time to put my phone on do not disturb. It goes on to nighttime mode, and that kind of reduces both the blue light and also that kind of stimulation of our brain before our bed. External factors, become more aware of sport and non-sport disturbances. So what things are already disturbing you in your sleep? Can we just take time to note them? What can we change? Is there anything we can have an influence on? Routine, the time we go to bed, the timing of our meals, trying not to eat right before we go to bed. Typically, if we can do an hour or two before we go to bed, that's seemed to be the most beneficial. Instead of sitting on our phone, scrolling through whatever it might be, if we can use that time to read, to reflect on a diary, or do some mindfulness, that can be particularly helpful in helping us get to sleep. In relation to optimizing our sleeping environment, again, we want this cool, dark, quiet, comfortable space. We don't want to spend too much time in our bed when we're not sleeping. Otherwise, our brain gets confused. What are we doing here? Are we sleeping or are we awake? Again, this organization is key. If we can be organized, be in control of our environment with planners, to-do lists, whatever it might be, this is going to reduce our stress and help us get to sleep. And then lastly, one of the big focuses was on napping as being critical, especially for swimmers, vital when you're in a hectic schedule. Oh, I've jumped back a slide. And especially if you've missed sleep, using a nap to help you kind of catch up on sleep. So that's it for sleep. I'm just going to take a quick wee minute here. I promise I'm not going to whistle. I'm just going to whistle through a little bit more, and then we'll have some breakout rooms and some discussion. I'm aware I'm doing a lot of talking. So after our sleep, we went to focus on this kind of a bit more about our performance focus. And we spoke about pre-performance routines. So we spoke about what are they, and we decided, well, we agreed that they're a sequence of task relevant thoughts and actions that we engage in systematically prior to the performance of our skill. So it's an ordered collection of thoughts and behaviours. It's not just superstitions. So there's a purpose to them. They help us. We spoke about different athletes and their pre-performance routines. You might remember we spoke about the All Blacks doing the haka. We spoke about Rafael Nadal and fixing his hair and his hairband and his bouncing of the ball. And we also spoke about Michael Phelps and his big arm swings and his back slaps. Then we moved on to just how we might establish a pre-performance plan and routines. And again, this is from Jack's slides, which is super helpful. All the different things that you might want to consider, especially on race day, to include in your pre-performance routine. So prior to performing your competition bag, what do I need? Having planned, again, coming back to this planning and organisation being really important. When do I leave for the pool? What time do I want to arrive? How long is my warm-up? When do I want to talk to my coach? What do you eat the day before and the day of a race? And again, these are things that we can all control, we can plan for, we can make sure that they are consistent so that we feel organised and ready to perform and confident. Equally, this is where it gets a bit more about the specific performance. When do I put my suit on? What priming exercises might I do? When do I land prime? What can I do to prime? So what kind of stretches or exercises do you go through? Do you do some squats? Do you do some skipping? Is it just a series of stretching? Is there something else that you'd like to incorporate into your pre-performance routine? And again, this is something that's going to take a bit of playing around with. Okay, it's worth asking your coach. Okay, what kind of suggestions might you look for? And trying out some different exercises to see what suits you best. When do I put my music on? What kind of music do you listen to? Are you somebody that likes to be really pumped up and excited before a race? Or do you want something that calms you down a little bit more? And again, there's going to be a difference there in all of us. So it's about figuring out what works for you. What time are you going to go to the call room? Do you have a routine for when you're in the call room? Maybe you need to consider what naps you might have between the sessions. But it's about thinking about all of these different things kind of together and what works best for you. So again, you have to develop your routine and your plan. And it might be months before, you might be trying to test it out and see how it works, see if there's things that work and some that don't that you need to tweak and change. But each competition that you go to is an opportunity for you to practice this and then refine it until you've nailed it. So remember that every competition, every single one, is an opportunity for you to practice and refine your pre-performance routine. Other things that you might look to include in your pre-performance routine might be self-talk. I was on a coach's workshop recently and somebody described it to me as we do lots of physical priming. What about the mental priming that we do? And we decided that and discussed that self-talk, and particularly instructional or motivational self-talk, can be really beneficial in this idea of mental priming. How do we get I'm jumping too far. How do we get our brain ready to perform? And so self-talk, just as a reminder, is this kind of internal dialogue that we have with ourselves, kind of that, what are we thinking? What are we saying to ourselves in our head? And it is a type of attentional control. So we can use instructional self-talk, which is giving ourselves instructions to direct our attention to specific aspects of our performance. So it might help give us confidence. It might create our expectations and just help us perform. However, we do need to be aware of what we're saying to ourselves, because if we don't notice it, then we can't change it. So it is important that you take a bit of time to pause, and as we did in the stop activity, that stop, take a breath, observe what you're thinking, notice what thoughts are going through your head so that we can change them. So again, one thing that I would quite often do with athletes is if we're finding pre-performance nerves or pre-performance anxiety is impacting us, I would encourage them to just stop prior to the performance, notice what thoughts they're having. After a race, we would go back to, okay, what kind of thoughts were going through your head prior to the race? We would then develop a plan of, well, here are some instructional self-talk cues that we're going to have for you to focus on in that space where you normally get nervous. So instead of thinking about getting nervous, we're going to think about squeezing your ears in that streamline. We're going to think about specific aspects of your race plan, specific technical points to help give you that focus. So that was just one aspect of self-talk. We can also try and control our thoughts using self-talk. So again, this attentional control, this could be having key words that you're just going to say to yourself, either out loud or in your head. The examples Jack gave were push, smooth, entry, those focus points for you. It might be motivational, giving yourself kind of that pep talk, this is my moment, I've got this, I can do this. It might be about stopping negative thoughts. It might just be saying to yourself, stop, focus, reframe, anything along those lines. So again, that's going back to that stop technique. It might be instructional, deep breath, release. It could be about skill acquisition. So really, again, honing in on really specific aspects of a skill. Again, Jack's example was about streamline off the wall and just reminding yourself that that's a key point that you're focusing on. It might be about anxiety control, stick to the plan, remember your routine, follow the process, commit to the process. Or it could be to cultivate positivity. I can do this, I'm ready for this, I've got this. And whilst it's really helpful for us to have this kind of self-talk with ourselves and create this plan and attach these maybe statements or keywords to parts of our pre-performance routine, one thing we can also do is bring our coaches in on this. If you know that one specific kind of conversation or aspect of self-talk is what you need before a race, tell your coach and say, do you know, I find it really helpful, coach, if you give me that kind of instructional chat and remind me of my keywords prior to my race. And you can work together on that and help them keep you accountable to using that self-talk appropriately. And as I mentioned just a little minute ago, I think it is really important if we can attach our self-talk to specific components of our kind of physical pre-performance routine. This makes it much easier to remember. So it might be that when you're taking your jumper and your kit off, let's get ready for the blocks, you're telling yourself, I've got this, I've got this. It might be that as you're getting on the block, you're reminding yourself to push. It might be when you're in the call room, you're giving yourself that cultivating positivity. I can do this, I'm ready. So if we match these things up, the physical to go with the mental, it makes it much easier to remember. And in line with our self-talk, one of the other things we can do to help our pre-performance routine, or that can be incorporated into our pre-performance routine, is visualization or imagery. Again, the two words are typically used interchangeably. We did a little session, we practiced a little bit of imagery, we spoke quite a lot about how Michael Phelps used it. And some of the key points here I just wanted to remind you of is that it can be internal or external, or it can be both. So that was when we either imagine it through our own eyes or we imagine watching somebody else do it. There are individual differences in preference and ability. Some people don't like imagery, and that's okay, as long as you've given it a shot and tried it. And people will like to imagine things differently. But the more realistic it is, the better the effect is. So we want to try and get things, even like the timing of our races, nailed down to a T. We want to incorporate all of our senses and emotions. Imagine how you might feel in certain situations, what you might smell, what kind of noises might be going on, and then obviously what you might see. Practice makes perfect. The more we can practice it, the better we get at it. The more often it feels like we've been there, the more confident we feel when we turn up on race day and we've imagined it 100 times in our head already. I've also just added in there that PMR is a gateway to visualization. And again, just a little reminder, PMR is progressive muscle relaxation. And it is just one way that we can kind of build to visualization. So it might be that you find visualization quite difficult. So you can use progressive muscle relaxation to kind of build yourself up towards it. What is progressive muscle relaxation? Maybe I should have put these slides the other way around. It is going through this kind of sequential process of tensing and then relaxing your muscles one at a time, focusing on each muscle group in turn. So you'll take a slow, deep breath, tense up the muscle group, maintain the tension just for a few seconds, and then release your breath and release the tension. So we could do this starting from your head and working your way down. Normally I would do it starting with your toes, really curling your toes up, squeezing your feet, holding it and then releasing, and just noticing that feeling of relaxation before moving on to the next group. Again, consistently, this can be a really useful practice. It can help us relax. It's great just before bedtime to help you relax and get to sleep. And again, if you remember that clip of Phelps, he spoke about how, because Coach Bowman spoke about how his mum would just open the page, say one sentence, and Phelps relaxed so much that he was ready to sleep straight after that. So progressive muscle relaxation has so many benefits. As I said, it can help us relax. It gives us a bit more attentional awareness of what's going on in our body, and it can be kind of this key to visualization. It helps us begin to visualize different things. In terms of doing it, I think at the end I've put a resource, which is like a kind of a YouTube clip that talks you through it, so you can listen to it and put it on your phone, listen to it, and it can walk you through it. We don't all have mums, I'm sure, that are willing to sit by our bedside and talk us through progressive muscle relaxation. So the resource at the end could be quite helpful for this. Equally, in the slides, Jack also shared with us a list of just working his way up through the muscles, tensing each muscle, and then letting go. So you don't have to listen to something if you do not want to. And then finally, I promise I'm nearly there, we spoke about task simulation in practice. So how can we prepare for the worst case scenario? So task simulation is just, again, as it suggests, going through these practices, not in the kind of the real competition. So these were some of the suggestions that Jack gave about preparing for the worst case scenario. Could you try a stand-up swim with no goggles? Could you prepare yourself for those situations? Could you stimulate the task psychologically using progressive muscle relaxation and visualization? Could you spend 10 minutes a night or 10 minutes once a week just imagining what your race might look like and all the different processes to it, imagining going through your pre-performance routine into the race, what that might look like? Could you, in training, for this is an example Jack gave, he cut his warm-up short, had to sit for 15 minutes, stand up with no hat, borrow someone else's goggles. He was practicing through all these scenarios both in his head, and then he was also practicing some of these scenarios in the training environment. Just again, taking time to notice how these situations feel. If we can visualize and plan for when our routines go well and when they go wrong, then when we come to the real situation and things maybe don't go super smoothly, we don't feel as disrupted or anxious about it because we've rehearsed it and we know what's going to happen. So task simulation is really something that is kind of important, and that we can pull all these bits of psychology together: the self-talk, the pre-performance routine, the thought stopping or reframing, standing tall, standing confidently. If we can practice all these things in our head, in training, and then at every competition we go to, we're going to learn and we're going to get better. And one tool that we can use to help us with these is the implementation of cue cards. So it's just a reinforced reminder. It can look whatever you want it to look like. Jack used these lovely ones that have a kind of a 1, 2, 3, 4. He had one for PMR, and I think I've got one on the next slide he had for self-talk. But they can have anything that you would like on them that feels important to you, whatever your cue words might be. It might be that you've got a little sheet that you print out that kind of gives you your timing for the organisation of race day to help you. It can be as elaborate or as simple as you need or want it to be. Not quite a cue card, but you might have seen or kind of an example of a similar thing across different sports. You might remember the Lindsay Sharp, yeah, kind of iconic image when she had written on her kind of 3 keywords on her hands. We see that quite a lot in runners right now, or the back of the hand. Rugby players quite often write their kind of keywords or motivational things on their tape, on their wrists. We see that quite a lot. So just having that little cue card that you can have in your bag and take out and just remind you of those processes can be really, really helpful. As Jack's pointed out, it can be a shortened day of race checklist. It could be your PMR and visualization key cues, or it could be positive affirmations connected to self-talk. It's really up to you to use them as you wish. And this was kind of, again, his example that he gave us. First point, dive, streamline, up and out. 2, breathing, half and half tight. He had his confidence ones. This is my moment. I'm excited. I'm ready. Deep breath, stick to the plan, release. So he had his kind of motivational and positive affirmations, nerve control, and then these instructional self-talk cues here as well. So it's worthwhile just going away, playing about, creating your own cue cards. You can make them as colourful or as pretty as you would like them to be, and design them as nice as you would like, but you just need them to mean something to you. And then the last session we heard from Jack last week was talking about call room behaviours. He again shared with us that lovely video of Phelps in the call room. It can be a bit of a make or break scenario. Again, it's worth thinking about how you cope, what you want to feel like in the call room, what's beneficial for you. Practicing this as much as possible, whether it is kind of in training, race, training, timed swims, time trials, or actual competitions. We want to practice how you would cope or how you would behave in a call room. Confidence is key. Remember having that base camp confidence, standing tall, shoulders back, head up, make yourself big, keep smiling. And it's about knowing what works for you. What do you need in that space to get you into the zone? Is it grounding techniques? Is it visualizing? Is it music? Do you need to shut the world out? Use your self-talk in here, this kind of motivational, I'm prepared, I'm ready, I'm excited. And again, Jack shared with us a bit about how he's performed extremely when he's been extremely relaxed and when he's been extremely hyped. That's about how you control and channel your energy. So nobody else can tell you what works best for you. You've got to figure that out yourself. Okay, my time is over. I will stop talking and let you guys have some discussion. I have 3 questions here for you that I would like you to just have a think about in some breakout rooms, if that's okay, Alan, if you're okay to put people into some breakout rooms.
I'll sort it.
Amazing, thank you. The first being about what's your biggest learning or what are you taking away from these sessions? Second being something that you are going to try moving forward. And then thirdly, what would you like more of, or is there anything else that you would like to learn about? I noticed that I haven't actually put anything in there about what you didn't enjoy, so you can maybe include that if you would like. Does that sound okay? And I'll maybe just say, we just say 5 minutes for that. Is that okay?
No bother, I'll bring the rooms out.
Thank you. That other people, you might want to try out ideas that other people are doing and see if they work for you. But just because you're doing something different doesn't mean that what you're doing is wrong. We're all different. And then we've got the race day mentality stuff, because it's so easy to be negative for yourself before a race. Yep, and it can be really strongly affect your performance. That's so true. Thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else want to add anything to the kind of biggest takeaways from the sessions? No, super. Okay, what about question 2? What are you all going to go away and try out and experiment now? Would anyone like to share that with us?
I'll be happy to chat for Group 8, Zoe. So we spoke about, in relation to question 2, how it could be useful setting up some discussions with your coach, leaning on the coach a bit more, you know, and depending, I think they've obviously clocked on to right away, depending on what the event you were swimming, you could tailor that input that you were getting from your coach so that you were going into the particular event with the right kind of key thoughts foremost in your mind. And one thing that struck us was the level of organisation, you know, the amount of sort of prep and diaries and spreadsheets that goes into getting ready to swim, you know, to perform when it's required. So yeah, that was our things that better organised and probably leaning the coach a bit more with the two things that we took away from it in Group 8.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Sorry, coaches, that I've now just increased your workload as if you don't already do enough. But I think having that communication is really important. And so often the work I end up doing with athletes in swimming or otherwise ends up being just asking or telling coaches what we need from them. And quite often, if you've not had that conversation, they're trying to give you the best help, and actually it's not what the athlete needs or what they're looking for, or they've not figured out what they need yet. So if we can open those lines of communication, say, this is what would be really helpful for me, and how can we work together in this? What key phrases do you want me to use? It can perhaps make your life simpler. I don't know, coaches, if you've just got a few key words you need to remind them of, or the race plan. Yeah, that communication is really important. And as Jack spoke about before, the kind of the organisation, and I'm sure he'll also agree that it doesn't have to be quite as much as Jack loved, you know, the Excel spreadsheets and things, but it is about trying these things out and figuring out, okay, that's too much for me, that didn't work. But we need to consider, how are you using your time? Are you organised? And the key point of that is, if we can get as much of the organisation out of our head and onto paper, we don't have to think about it, and we can use our brain to think about swimming and think about racing instead of trying to figure out what time do I have to go for my shower and put my suit on. So a bit about that. We've got loads in the chat now. If I can, there we go. More visualisation. Yeah, give it a go, please do. I think I've put the link into the script. If not, again, I can share the script that I did with you guys to give that a go and adapt it as you would like. Walking tall and always looking confident. Something else you're talking about? Yep. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Joe. Techniques on challenging your thought is it's a challenge, not a threat. Yep. Or it's an opportunity. This is a chance for me to perform rather than something scary. It's a chance to show everybody what you're made of. Pre-race activation 20 to 30 minutes before the race, and trying to do progressive muscle relaxation. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, guys. Anything else that somebody's going to try going forward? No, super. Okay, lastly, did anyone get to question 3? What would you like more of, or would you like to learn more of, or have we not covered that you'd be interested in terms of kind of psychology and the mental aspect of racing? Did anyone come up with anything?
I think so. In our group, it was quite a difficult question because so much has been covered. It's hard to know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. But because they really appreciated the amount of detail that had gone into each topic. They really found having an example really helped them to learn a bit more about it, and also to that, so they could put it into practice. Being told to plan is great, but if you don't know what that looks like, so Jack's example of his daily schedule was great, and then with the visualization, they really enjoyed you taking them through it. So having that detail and an example of each of the aspects was really helpful. Yeah,
that's good. Thank you for sharing that. That's really helpful for us. And somebody else has said the interactive things as well in the group. So that's what we would like more of. Yeah. And when things don't go to plan, yeah, we can definitely do a bit more about that. Learning more about managing emotions. Yeah, that's a really tricky one. And yeah, that's a really good suggestion. Okay. Does anyone have anything else to add there? No, super. Okay, I am now going to post in the chat a little link to a Google form. I don't know if anyone's used Google Forms before, but it's super simple. You click on the link, you answer a couple of questions, and the couple of questions are basically just those 3 things, plus how much did you enjoy these workshops? I have included Jack and Alan on it, so only the three of us can see your feedback. Your name doesn't go on it, so nobody knows who it is, but we would kind of really appreciate if you could take a couple of minutes to maybe do that just at the end of the session, just so we can see what you enjoyed and what you would like more of, so that we can make that happen going forward. So I'll leave that in there, and then hopefully, if we're just about to finish off anyway, if you guys could do that, we would really appreciate you just giving us 2 minutes of your time. Nearly at the end, I've just included here as well on the slides a list of the resources. So we've got the book about breathing, which we spoke about quite a lot early on in the workshops, which is really helpful. He's also been on a lot of podcasts if you're not a reader. A link to the Scottish Swimming's YouTube page where all these sessions are uploaded. The Life Lessons from Sport and Beyond podcast with Simon Monday, again, which talks about a lot of these topics that we have covered. The Headspace website, if you're a bit more interested in the mindfulness, grounding techniques, breathing techniques, mental health awareness resources, and the Mind website. We've got a how-to video for progressive muscle relaxation. And then we've also got the link here. I don't know if you remember, Jack used some really helpful and kind of attractive infographics from this YLM Sports Science page. So it's also got a link to their Instagram page, which does quite a lot of research. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jack, about sleep and kind of the sports science aspects of it. I can't see him, so I'm hoping he's nodding and not disagreeing with me. Yeah, he's nodding. Excellent. So there's a link to those resources there. And I suppose that's it from us. Thank you very much for logging on and listening to us on a Sunday night. We appreciate your time. We'd welcome any questions, and Merry Christmas when it comes.
Thank you, Zoe. That was it certainly was a whistle-stop tour, but as I said just at the end of the breakout room, it's just amazing how much we've covered. And thank you to everybody. Just add my own thanks to everyone's commitment. I've said it many times in the introductions, by being on these calls, you're making a commitment to yourself. Nobody's asking you, nobody's forcing you. There's no obligation at all to be on these calls unless you want to be on them. So I just add my personal thanks to everybody, and I hope to see you all next week swimming fast. What to do now is to go on to that link that Zoe put up. If you haven't already done so, complete the Google form, give us your feedback, and when you've done that, you can sign off. Or take a note of that and fill it in at another time. But yeah, please enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a good final few days of preparation and put all this stuff into practice. We'll see you swimming fast and being positive next weekend.